The four foreign ministers of the Quadrilateral of Democracies, or Quad, met in Washington today. They sent out a strong message to China, opposing Beijing's coercive tactics in the South China Sea. The stage is now set for a Quad meeting in New Delhi to be hosted by Prime Minister Modi, where President Trump, Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, and Prime Minister Anthony Albanese will attend. What does this China plus 4 matter for New Delhi? Joining me to discuss this are Ambassador Ashok Sajanhar and Pramit Pal Chaudhary. Gentlemen, welcome to the News9 Plus show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ambassador Sajanhar, what's your reading of the meeting of the four foreign ministers, the Quad foreign ministers in the United States? Does the Quad seem to be as much of a priority for the Trump administration as it was for the Biden administration?
Well, thank you very much, Sandeep. Yes, if I were to give you a very precise and succinct response, yes, it does appear to be. And till the meeting took place, till Mr. Trump took over, there was a bit of a question mark on that, because you would have seen that whether it was in 2017, Mr. Trump in 1.0 had gone back on many of the very significant initiatives that had been taken by the Obama administration.
Right.
So here also he has taken many steps to do away with several of the Biden initiatives, even in terms of Paris Accord, climate change,
Yes.
getting out of WHO, signed so many orders that have debunked many of the initiatives taken by Biden. So here also it was thought that since Mr. Biden had paid so much of attention and given so much of time, effort, and energy to the revival of Quad,
Yes.
meaning putting it at the summit level. You would recall that Mr. Biden came to office in January 21, and the first Quad summit,
Yes.
of course, it was in a virtual format, was held in March of 2021.
Yes.
And over the three and a half years, we've seen there were 6 summits. I don't think there's been any international organization in which,
Yes.
global summits have taken place. So there were some question marks whether Mr. Trump will also give it the same salience. But, Sandeep, my own understanding, my own assessment was that Mr. Trump would do so because Quad is really his own baby.
Right.
He's the one who revived it in November
Yes.
2017
Right.
on the sidelines of the East Asia Summit in Manila. And so, he would be taking personal ownership and personal pride in the fact that after a long interregnum of about 10 years, because the
Yes.
last Quad meeting was held in 2007. So I
Yes.
think the fact that these foreign ministers have met within a few hours, as Dr. Jaishankar put it,
Yes.
of the inauguration of President Trump, I think that is very significant, and it really sends out, as the joint statement says, a very strong and clear message that all the 4 countries are
Yes.
very strongly committed to taking the issue forward.
Right. All the 4 countries are strongly committed to taking the issue forward. Pramit, is there a danger that Trump could be stacking up on bargaining chips to make a deal with China when he finally meets Xi Jinping? Could the Quad then be a casualty of such a meeting, you think? Or is Trump actually fully behind the Quad, as Ambassador Sajanhar mentioned?
Yeah, I don't think the Quad doesn't really offer anything to be bargained with. The only thing America could do is withdraw from the Quad, which I don't think it has any interest in doing.
Right.
He has stacked his administration with China hawks. Waltz, the NSA, Rubio, the Secretary of State in the past, when they were both senators, congressmen, had said that they saw the Quad they felt the Quad should be elevated to the status of NATO.
Right.
And have had nothing but very strongly, if I'm correct, Rubio sponsored a bill calling upon India to be treated on the same level as NATO,
Yes.
NATO partners. So all the language from his team has been very clear. Quad ultimately is not much of a bargaining chip because
Right.
it's still in many ways a nascent organization. It
Right.
doesn't have a secretariat. It doesn't do anything yet military.
Right.
And Trump has made it very clear that what he expects from China concessions are economic.
Right.
So he may be prepared to sacrifice or provide a window for TikTok to come back,
Right.
or something of that's not overtly a security concern for the United States. It's a minor one. But he's not prepared to, I think, do anything beyond that. But what he's really looking for is giant concessions from China on the trade front, which I don't think China will actually be able to fulfill. Trump's demands were too high last time.
Yes.
And if you may remember, he struck a deal with the Chinese on tariffs and imports, which the Chinese simply failed to do.
Right, absolutely. And Ambassador Sajanhar, the point that Pramit made, the fact that the Quad really doesn't have a secretariat. We really don't know what the Quad really does. Is it like an Asian NATO? I think every country, including India, has strongly denied that prospect. But what do you see the Quad really becoming under Donald Trump in the next couple of years, in the next 3 or 4 years? Will we see more of the same that we did in the past? Is this more of a posturing organization or a quadrilateral where all 4 countries, jointly threatened by China's rise in Asia, take positions on it without doing much on the ground?
Okay, let me put it this way. A couple of points that you have made and what Pramit also said. That it is just mere posturing. If it was mere posturing, let me recount what, Wang Yi, the foreign minister of China, had said when Quad was revived in 2017. He said it is like a bubble on the surface of the ocean. It is froth. And it is going to disappear in no time. It will not have, again, the example was given of 2007, when the only meeting that had taken place in 2007, after that, it did not meet for the next 10 years, for a variety of reasons, which we don't need to go into right now. But he had predicted, but that has not happened. And so, what China, and for that matter, Russia, because Russia takes China's lead on these matters, Indo-Pacific, Quad, etc. What it says is that it is an Asian NATO. That means they are China is seriously worried that it has great potential. I can see that there is this huge sense of insecurity as far as China is concerned. And but there are other countries, particularly India, I would say, which is not keen to sort of, transform it into metamorphose into a security alliance or a partnership or relationship. So when we had the new Prime Minister of Japan saying that, we would like the Quad to transform into an Asian NATO, India was the first country which said that, we do not have any intention of doing so.
Of military alliances,
Yeah, the point that you make is, what we have said, what Prime Minister Modi had said, I think, at the Tokyo summit in 2022, that Quad is a force for global good. So we are basically providing, global public goods to the countries in the region, particularly Southeast Asia, particularly ASEAN, because that is where you feel assertiveness of China is getting much more, particularly in the South China Sea. So all the initiatives that have been taken, whether it is on humanitarian assistance, whether it is on domain awareness, whether it is on coast guards, it's on infrastructure, it's on education, health, it is basically vaccines. It is basically to provide, in my view, greater options and greater opportunities to the countries in the region, so that they don't have to depend so heavily upon China, which can then, coerce them to succumb to any of its demands as far as, China's other interests are involved.
Absolutely. And, to those public goods, I'd like to add some military goods as well, Ambassador Sajanhar, that India seems to have done its own share of countering China in the Southeast Asia. It's sold BrahMos missiles to the Philippines. It's in talks to sell it to Indonesia and to Vietnam. Pramit, what do you make of this? India finally amping up its game when it comes to arms sales, not afraid of China anymore, selling them to China's neighbors, especially around the South China Sea?
I think the limitation for us to sell BrahMos in the past was never India, it was really Russia. Because as you know, Russia provides a scramjet for the BrahMos. And from what I'd heard, there was a problem getting the Russians to agree simply because of their relationship with China, which obviously is much friendlier than ours. But that seems to have been overcome. Now suddenly we are in a position to sell the BrahMos to various countries, Philippines being the first, now looks like Indonesia, and maybe Vietnam as well. But I'll just say on the Quad, if you look at the joint statement that was issued by the four ministers,
Yes.
what I think was interesting was that it makes a reference to the quote, security in all domains,
Right.
that the Quad would now be looking at that. This is, I would argue, a slight shift in the language, and was partly led, I think, by India, at India's request, because India will be, as you know, hosting the summit probably sometime in August and
Yes.
September. It's also noticeable that while it's a very short statement, because obviously this is not this is more a signaling process, given that the
Yes.
administration had barely been in office for 24 hours, and Rubio, Secretary of State, had only been confirmed a few hours before
Yes.
the
Yes.
meeting was held. In fact, I heard the Senate fast-tracked his confirmation so that he could attend that meeting.
Yes.
There was no mention of ASEAN centrality. And as you said, the language, while it did not mention China, was quite implicit in stating that China was the primary concern. So I thought that, given that it was a short statement, it was very interesting that it was the language I thought was sharper on the security side.
Right.
And I think for me, is a signal that we're going to start to see some movement on that front.
Right.
But as you said, India is already being more open and willing to take on China, if you wish, or at least do things that would threaten China. And that includes the BrahMos cruise missiles. If you notice, Jaishankar and Nirmala Sitharaman, the Prime Minister, in their speeches, increasingly, you'll often find a mention of Taiwan.
Yes.
And I think that we're going to see some movement on that relationship. We already have a very good economic relationship. Literally dozens of Taiwanese companies have settled in India now. But what they want is a political relationship, and I think we're
Yes.
going to see the beginning of that falls short of recognition, but something right now we've never had anything with Taiwan. No Indian minister's ever met a Taiwanese minister, for example.
Right.
So yes, I think we'll see that Quad becoming a little bit harder on the edges than it has been from now, and I think that's exactly what the Trump administration would be happy to embrace.
A Quad that's a little harder on the edges, as Pramit Pal Chaudhary just said. Ambassador Sajjanar, I just want to read out that line to you, what Pramit just mentioned, the fact that the joint statement says that our four nations maintain our conviction that international law, economic opportunities, peace, stability and security in all domains, including the maritime domain. All domains, does that cover space, cyber, the land boundaries as well? Has the definition of the Quad kind of expanded into multiple realms, and therefore you would see cooperation on other frontiers as well?
Yes, I would tend to agree with that, because I think the agenda and the scope of the Quad has been expanding, from day one. If you remember the first virtual summit, which was known as the Spirit of the Quad in March 2021, it, basically was discussing three issues, that is critical emerging technologies, the COVID-19 vaccines and climate change. And after that, we have such a huge array of issues on which discussions are taking place. And I think the statements have been getting increasingly harder. Let's face it, that from 2017, when Quad was revived, there were no joint statements or declarations. After that, whether it is in the current statement or earlier, China has never been mentioned. But, it is Chinese activities, whether it is in terms of coercion, it is terms of aggressiveness, assertiveness, so resolution of disputes, etc. It is unmistakable as to, what the Quad is referring to.
Right.
The other point I think we need to recognize is that if you look at the Wilmington, Delaware statement, the summit that took place in September, there it is very categorically mentioned, for the first time, that the resolution of the issues in the South China Sea should be on the basis of the award of the Permanent Court of Arbitration.
Yes.
In 2016, you would recall that, your viewers would recall that Philippines had taken China to the Permanent Court of Arbitration at
Yes,
The Hague in
at The Hague.
2014.
Yes.
And they had, in their judgment in 2016, categorically rejected all claims of China under the 9-dash line.
Yes.
So, you know, and for the first time they have mentioned, so who else could it be referring to, you know, but China? So I think the statements have been getting stronger, statements have been getting more direct. And here also, when you're talking about all domains, I
Yes.
think definitely the issue must have been that, you know, none of the other Quad members has a land boundary with China except India.
Absolutely,
So I
yes.
think that also needs to be encompassed, you know, that needs also to be incorporated in whatever discussions are taking place. We shouldn't really limit it only to maritime issues.
Yes.
So I think that is, this domain definitely has the continental dimension also, and also
Yes.
the extraterrestrial, you know, space, cyber, etc. issues.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, a Quad that seems to be getting harder around the edges, as our experts have just told us that. And that's the story here after that very significant meeting of foreign ministers, the Quad foreign ministers in Washington. Thank you very much, Ambassador Sajanhar, Pramit Pal Chaudhary, for joining us.
Thank you.